Talking about all these people in the Old Testament who lived by faith, longing for that day, waiting for it. And the writer of Hebrews says all these people in the Old Testament, they were still living by faith when they died. Like they had faith, but it didn't keep them from dying. They never saw it. They died. They were living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were strangers and foreigners on earth. We're exiles here on earth. This isn't the place it was supposed to be. He goes on, and what he says, people who say such things, they show that they are looking for a country of their own, a homeland. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Man, we want that kind of home, a heavenly one where God is a part of it, one where things go the way they ought to, where we don't live in constant disappointments and frustrations. We want a home like that. I mean, you think about that. Like, what is home? Some of you, you've traveled and you've lived in so many different places. You wonder at times, like, what is home? I mean, I grew up in various places, and sometimes it's like, man, where's home? What is it? And I was thinking about that as I was coming back from vacation. You know, after a certain amount of days on vacation, you start to get a little weary and a little tired. You're just like, there's so many hotel beds you can sleep in or places you can crash, and you just start longing for home. And for me, it was like, I just want to be back in my bed with my pillow. And that is home, when I can finally go, that's home. That is it not? Where you long for that place. The writer of Hebrews is saying that is what the Christian life is like. It's one of longing, where you live not by sight, but by faith, knowing that home is there on the way. And there's a question like, how do we get home? That's not the question we're going to answer today. That's coming in a couple weeks. The question today is maybe a little more present. It's how do we live as exiles when we're not home? How do we live here now by faith as exiles? Because that's the real challenge of knowing how we exist in this life in the meantime. If we're not there yet, how do we live here now then? What does that look like for us? Josh did a phenomenal job last week when he was sharing about, who am I in exile? That it begins with who has my heart, and how I'm constantly trying to be formed by the place of exile and knowing our identity, knowing who we are and whose we are in that space is so important. To get that right is the place where this begins. But then with that identity set, how do I now live here? And Josh mentioned how in the ancient Near Eastern cultures, there were kind of three major world powers that made their way through, and each one of them dominated in different ways. The Egyptians, they rose to power, and they maintained control and maintained the people that they conquered by enslaving them. You could think of the stories of the Exodus and how Moses went in and said, Pharaoh, let God's people go. And all the stuff that went there, where the Egyptians would constantly try, when they conquered a nation, to take the people from that nation and make them human machinery to build their spaces. That's how Egypt maintained control and order. But then along came the Assyrians, and the Egyptians were south of Israel. And then north, up in towards modern day Turkey, in that area, lived the Assyrians. There has perhaps never been a more brutal regime to ever rise in the history of the world. They conquered people by slaughtering them. They just absolutely killed them. We still have archaeological and historical data to understand that they would take the bodies of their victims and the people they conquered and just line their city walls with those people put on spikes in their heads everywhere around the building. They were a brutal people who ruled by fear and by death. But then came the Babylonians, perhaps the greatest ancient Near Eastern empire to ever rise in the history of the world. Outside of Rome and now America, there's perhaps been no greater dominant force in the world than the Babylonians. They ruled with a mighty hand, but they conquered in a way that was different. They would defeat you, but then they would assimilate you. They were the Borg of the ancient Near East, if you think of it that way. If you're a Star Trek fan, maybe not. Do you guys know who the Borg are? Oh, come on, like Captain Picard. Yeah, all right, whatever. So, sorry, my nerd is showing. But I just, you can think of the Babylonians as that way. They would bring you into their land. They would take the best of the best from the places they conquered. They bring them in. They would give them new names. They would give them clothing. They would give them a new language, another education, different food, different wine, and they would say, you are to become Babylonian. And they would completely bring them into their system. And that is how exile worked for Israel. They were swept into Babylon and then re-educated, reshaped, and re-imaged into the image of Babylon. This is what you were supposed to be like. Guys, listen, you have to understand. That's the way our world works now. Not with hard power, but with what certain people, especially in intelligence fields, call soft power. It's the subtle ways in which you're manipulated and shaped and formed into the image of what the marketers or the nation that you're a part of wants you to be like. Where it's like they hold out the image of what they want you to be. And you're given this through your Instagram feed or your Facebook channels or your TV shows that you watch or the people that you read, the stuff that you do, the places you walk by when you're in a mall or in other places where all of these images are erected to show you this is what the good life looks like. This is what you want. And the good life here in America usually looks a little, more granola and crunchy in some ways. It's nice latte art. And it's fashion, but not too much high fashion. It's relaxing. It's nice headphones. It's good homes, nice cars, decent vacations. The good life. And that is the image that we often are being shaped into. And if we're not careful, like Israel and Babylon, we will be swept up and assimilated, lost in a sea of images that we are being drawn into, reshaped into the image of Babylon, or you could say America, rather than into the image of God. And so, it is here that we go back to the book of Daniel to ask the question, how do we live in that place without being reshaped into the image of something else other than God? How do we live as exiles without becoming part of Babylon? Daniel 1, as Josh showed last week, is essentially, Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego taking the Daniel diet and becoming, 10 times better than everybody else as they leaned into who God had made them and what he was calling them to. It wasn't really about a Daniel diet, just so you know, don't do that. But it was this story about how they stood out. In Daniel 2, the king has a dream, which Daniel is able to, one, tell him the dream and what it is, and also interpret it for him. And then Daniel is exalted to the third highest place in all of Babylon. And he's like, hey, I got my buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Can they come up with me? And Nebuchadnezzar's like, whatever you want, bud. I'll give it to you. You clearly have wisdom and power that no one else in Babylon has. And so he exalts Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego up to the highest levels of the officialdom of Babylon. And these guys take their place as rulers in these spaces. And that's where we turn, because we see this story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and what it has to teach us about how we now live in exile. So Daniel 3, you can turn there in your Bibles. You can see it on the screen. We'll start in verse 1. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And so he makes this ridiculously high. If you think about the dimensions, it's a 10-to-1. So it's very tall, very skinny. So whether it was a full person, it would be a very tall, skinny person. Whether it was a pedestal that then they placed a god, the image of a god on top of, or whether it was some sort of obelisk and tower that was there that represented their god. This thing stood as an image of gold. And so he puts that up there, and then he summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. He's like, hey, all of y'all, you're coming. All the people that he's put in power, he's like, you are coming to my dedication. So the satraps, prefects, governors, you see how he's repeating it? That's on purpose. He's like, everybody's coming to my party for my dedication of my big giant tower. And so governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. So you can imagine like these guys showing up and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego going, okay, can we just get through? This isn't in the text. This is just how I imagine it. And they're like, can we just get through this? Didn't Daniel warn him about like statues of gold and erecting? Like, what a dork. I cannot believe he's doing this. And like, of course, not to his face. I mean, he's the king. They're not going to do that. But like, you can imagine like, we'll show up, we'll do our thing. We're governors. We got to do the thing we're doing. And then we'll go home. And so they show up for this dedication. And then something unexpected happened. The herald loudly proclaimed, nations and peoples of every language, which means that all of these officials are all a part of the Borg of Babylon, that they've been collected from all these nations and brought in and assimilated into Babylon. And they go, hey, nations and peoples of every language, this is what you were commanded to do. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, essentially, as soon as the band starts to play, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. This image there. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. And so idols were often erected, and they were called images. They bore the image or the likeness of the god. They weren't the god themselves. They all knew that when they came to stand before a tower or a statue or whatever, they knew that wasn't the god. They knew it was in the likeness of the god, and that they're just there to observe that. But then the guy says, look, when the music plays, you got to fall down. You have to worship before the likeness of this god. And now Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are put in a very awkward position, because whoever doesn't do it is going to be thrown into a blazing furnace. And they go, oh, this took a turn. Didn't see that one coming. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshiped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. However, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not play along. Maybe they were thinking about the very 10 words, the 10 commandments that God had given his people at Mount Sinai, that started with, you shall have no other gods before me, and do not make a graven image, which is like an engraved image. Do not make an image at all of me or of any God. You were not to have something like that before you. And so maybe they were thinking back to the very start of the words on Mount Sinai to the people of God and go, we can't do this. We can't fall down with everybody else. So they stood up. And that got some people riled up. And they're like, you think you're better than us? You think you can do whatever you want? So they went back and reported to King Nebuchadnezzar what they saw. And they said, but hey, Nebuchadnezzar, you need to know there's some Jews whom you've set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Like, they're not playing your game. They're not doing, hey, your majesty, we are here for you. But they they're not. They're doing their own thing. You need to know that. And so, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I've set up?" You gotta give him some credit here. He's like, I'm not just gonna take their word for it. I'm gonna let you answer for this. Is it true? Did you do this? And he goes, no, listen. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue from my hand? He's like, I'm just you and me here. Not everybody, like, we're going to play the music again. I'm going to give you another chance. I'm just going to make sure you understand. You get this right. And you got to love this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, "King Nebuchadnezzar." You can still revere him, call him king. King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. Do you know what that's like? To be able to say those words, especially somebody who has power to like kill you, and you go, I don't actually need to defend myself. I'm not going to do it. It's like you can see a trust in another defender. And they're like, we don't need to defend ourselves. How often have you found yourself in a place where all you wanted to do was defend yourself, to cry out, to shout out, to be like, no, you got to know this and this and this and this and this. What if we understood that, like, you have another defender and you can just shut your mouth and keep going and not defend yourself? And that's what they did. They said, we don't need to defend ourselves in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. He can. And he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. And then but even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. You're still speaking to him with kindness, referring to your majesty. Thank you for this opportunity to hear us, but we don't need to defend ourselves, and respectfully, we decline. We're not going to bow down. The courage of those men in that space, man. It says, then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude toward them changed. All of a sudden, he shifts in the way he sees them and is going to engage them. And he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Like, they're in. And I mean, you can just see the intensity and the rage of Nebuchadnezzar's wrath, and the fact that even the heat of the fire goes up 7 times. That the soldiers that bring them there just die trying to push these men into that furnace. As they go in there, yet it says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? And they replied, certainly, your majesty. And he said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. And Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Man, could you just imagine like being in that space? And Nebuchadnezzar's going, wait, I see a fourth man in that fire. And he looks like a son of God. And he realizes these words that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have spoken to him are true. That there is a God who can save from his hand. And he calls them out of the fire. And as they come out, they realize that nothing is singed. Nothing is burnt. And nothing even smells like smoke. And that's what being in exile is like, where you're just thrown into a furnace and find yourself in a place you don't want to be. And yet these guys come out not even smelling like smoke, no chains on them. Listen, we all know people, and maybe you're one of them, who, because oftentimes to no fault of their own, maybe it was just the way you were raised, but like you bear all the marks that come with abuse as a kid or mistreatment. And maybe it was other things. Maybe it was the loss of a spouse or a child, or maybe it was the loss of a job and career. Maybe it was like just whatever the tragedy was that you've gone through in your life, or tragedies, plural, because you're in this place of exile where things don't go right, things don't work out. And you've come through those things, but like you still smell like it, you know? Like the stench of the smoke of these things that you've gone through or your friends have gone through, it just hangs on them. You know what I mean? We're like, it's still there. And what's crazy about their story is that not only do they go into the fire and come through it, but as they come out, the stench of it isn't even on them. They're not even wearing the smell of it. You see, that's the kind of rescue that God wants to bring you through. The kind of thing where you don't just barely make it out and the stench of all the stuff you've come through dominates your life. He wants to bring you to wholeness and to healing and to a place where things are set right and good. Not where you were dominated by the stench of decay and death and tragedy all around you. And that's where they came through that. They didn't even smell that way. And Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." Like he sent the angel to you. He goes, he sent the Malach to you. Here he's come in this space. And they trusted in him and defied the king's commands. And they were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any God except their own God. They never gave up. They never gave in. Wow. They trusted in him. And then he exclaims in the last statement, "For no other God can save in this way." You know, that kind of salvation, not where he didn't like blow a cold, icy breath from heaven and extinguish the fire. That's how our prayers go. God, can you just don't let me go through it. Don't let me go through it. Get me out of it. Get me out of it. Get me out. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Like, I brought you into exile. All your prayers to get out of it are the wrong prayers. I have you in this space. I brought you into this land, into this wilderness. You're here. You're living in it. You have to figure out how to live in this space. Because there is something about being in that you need to know. Perhaps in many ways, they're thinking about that letter that Jeremiah wrote to them as they were entering into exile. The one we read at the beginning of the series on exile. The letter he wrote to them there. And in that letter of Jeremiah, it says, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city of which I've carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you prosper too. He goes, this is what I'm doing. I am bringing you through this, not around it, but through it. And what kind of God, Nebuchadnezzar says, saves that way? A God who brings them into this space. And he could have just blasted the furnace shut, closed it all down. Instead, he sends them into the furnace, into that space, and then begins to rescue them out of that, or not out of it, but through that. Where he comes and he's with them in that fire. In that place is where God is, right there in the midst of all of it with them. What kind of God can save that way? And we have to understand their courage. And what they did is remarkable. They did not seek death, but they did not shirk it. They did not shrink back from it at all when they were put in a position where they had to answer. They refused to betray their God, even in their light and real possibility that they may die right there in that space. And what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego take us on. Hold on one second. This is going crazy, isn't it? I feel like I got a light show going on around me. Like, there we go. We're good? Maybe settle in on that. I just want to make sure we're together on this. We good? We're good? All right. What they show us, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is how to take that path that Jeremiah gave them of subversive loyalty. It's a subversive loyalty. Remember that Jeremiah said, seek the peace and prosperity of the city. Seek the good of the city. That word peace there, it's the Hebrew, you guys know the Hebrew word for peace? Gave it away. Shalom. Yeah. Do you know the Hebrew word for shalom? like he goes, do you, in this space, it's still a greeting to this day, shalom, when one would greet each other. But do you know that peace in that way is not the absence of conflict? That's often how we in America define peace. We define it by, okay, there's just no war. We're not having war right now. But how do we bring that peace? We bring that kind of peace by having the biggest weapons. And if we have the biggest weapons, then you're going to be too afraid to use your weapons for the most part. And if you do use them, we're just going to crush you. And this is how we have peace. It's just the absence of conflict. But that's not the Jewish understanding of peace. That's not what shalom means. Shalom does not mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of wholeness and flourishing in life. It's the way the world ought to be. Shalom, in many ways, is that glimpse of the Garden of Eden. It's the glimpse of home. And what Jeremiah tells them is you need to seek the shalom of even Babylon. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego find themselves in this place where they're going, how do we do that? How do we live faithful to our God and also seeking the good and the peace of Babylon in this place where we think of that as the enemy? And man, we feel that all the time here, where we think oh, it's either red or blue. Some are the good guys, some are the bad guys. And whatever side you find yourself on, you think the other side are the bad guys. And you're like, that's the enemy. And there can be no compromise. There can be do not seek their good. If you seek their, but think about this. The letter Jeremiah is writing to them is saying, no, seek the good and the shalom of the city that you are living in. Seek that in that place for the enemy that has conquered you and brought them into your land. You are going to live here and you are going to die here. So seek the good of the place where you are living. That's what he calls them to. But do it in a way that you never lose who you are and whose you are. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they find a way to do this where it's not, first and foremost, it's not a way of revolt. A revolt where you're just going to bring war and destruction and like hatred to the other side. Where you just want to like just crush whatever place you feel like you're in, whoever the enemy is. That's the way they could have done it. They could have been like, no, we're fighting to the brutal, bitter end. We're going to fight with our hands around our swords and we're going to make Babylon pay until every one of us are dead. That could have been a way they moved out and lived in exile. They didn't. Another way that they could have gone is to just completely and totally surrender and compromise. Like, we're just going to surrender to this. We're going to become like Babylon. We're going to be in this space. But Jeremiah, he calls them not to fight, not to rebel, not to revolt, but also not to compromise. He calls them into this unique third way that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego put on display here. It's this way of subversive loyalty where they're going to say, Your Majesty, we're here. We're to help you. We'll serve in your entire regime. We'll be a part of this thing. We'll do our best to bring life into all these areas that we find ourselves, but we will not bow down to your God. We will not surrender to another image. We will not find ourselves in that place. They took this third way, and it's there where you see their true loyalty. But they do it not by taking lives of other people, but by laying down their own. This way of subversive loyalty will cause you to give up your life. Perhaps this is why Jesus says, if anyone wants to follow my way, he must take up his cross and follow me, because it's going to cost you to live in this subversive loyalty where you serve Babylon or serve America. You seek its well-being, you seek its shalom, but your loyalty is to God and to God alone. And that's where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego found themselves, in that place where they rejected the idolatrous redefinitions of good and evil in that space. We are not going to let you define for us what is right and what is wrong. We're going to serve our God and him alone. And as we do that, we will seek the good of this space. But when those two came in conflict, they didn't bend a knee, and they refused to be reshaped into another image. In many ways, it's like what 1 Peter 2 says when he's writing to the church. He goes, Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. They just want to consume you. This way of this world wants to eat you alive and your soul alive. Live, and he goes, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. And so in this place, there's this subversive loyalty that means you are both offensive and attractive to the world around you. You're both. You're both offensive and attractive. Was this not Jesus? He would offend people. He would go, you are sinning. And he would tell people that they're sinning, that they're wrong. This isn't the way you should go. This does not bring life. He told a woman at a well, go call your husband. She's like, I don't have a husband. He's like, you're right, you've had 7. And the one you're living with now, he's not your husband. That's offensive. But she was compelled and attracted to him because she knew he held water that would bring life. He offended the Pharisees all the time and the Sadducees. I mean, whether you were irreligious or religious, he was offensive to you. But he was also unbelievably attractive as he loved people, cared for them, and brought them under his arm. A bruised reed he would not break. A flickering wick he would not snuff out. He cared for people in a way no one else had, and they saw it in him. They were compelled and drawn to that in him. Even the people who watched him die on the cross were drawn to him in that space. And here's the thing. We tend to not understand how to find that subversive loyalty of being both offensive and attractive. We generally choose one path or the other. And some of you, you're just downright offensive to everybody. You're pointing out their sin, doing this, condemning everybody. Hey, shouldn't do this, shouldn't vote that, shouldn't go there, shouldn't be this, shouldn't. Like, you're just offensive. There's nothing attractive about you at all. You're just offensive. And it's not because you follow Jesus, it's because you're a religious hypocrite. Some of you are looking at other people and probably shouldn't look at other people, just consider it. But probably in this space, there's not a lot of that. You know what I think we struggle with? We just want to be attractive. Yeah, I just want to look good. Because if I look good and people know I'm a Christian, then they'll think Jesus looks good and they'll be good. So I'm just not going to offend anybody. And I'm going to let them know that Jesus just loves everybody and that he's for them. And I'm never going to say anything offensive at all. I'm just going to make Christianity attractive. And it's going to be like, look at the Christianity looks good. I'm going to wear the swag. I'm going to do the thing. And we're going to make sure that we market and brand Jesus well, as if he needed a PR team. The problem with that is that's not the way Jesus took. And if you find yourself never being offensive, not because of the way you smell or you didn't put deodorant on, you find yourself never being offensive because you're not speaking up and you're refusing to bend the knee, then you can know that you are not taking the way of Jesus. You're not taking the way of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You're not taking the way of subversive loyalty. You've just compromised. And you've been assimilated like the Borg into the American way. And you need to find a way to stand up and to say the things and fight for the things that need to be fought for. Because if you violate certain social norms in America, all of a sudden people look at you and they go, oh man, try this out. Why don't you tell the people that you hang out with and you're around that, hey, all religions are not the same. They're not. It's not all roads lead up to the mountain point of God. And just whoever wants to do their own thing, but all paths lead to heaven. That's not the story. That's not the message. Jesus is unlike any other person. As Nebuchadnezzar said, what God can save like this? There is no other way than that of Jesus. He's the only one who saves. He's the only one who didn't say, hey, come up to the mountain, but he came down to the very bottom and said, I'm with you here in it and in the fire. There is no God that saves like that. And so I'm not going to just go along to get along and say all things are the same. How about this? How about you say every life has immense value and worth and is a handcrafted image of God. And before that child was ever conceived in a womb, Jeremiah says they were conceived in the mind of God. And so whether they are in a womb or they're 150 years old, they have incredible infinite worth as a handcrafted being of God. You don't think that's offensive in our culture today? It's incredibly offensive. But are you saying that? Or are you just trying to be attractive? How about people say, well, my body, I do whatever I want with my body. How about we understand Paul's words to the Corinthian church where he says, you are not your own. You were bought with a price. And therefore glorify God with your body. That can be offensive. But listen to me, it can also be unbelievably compelling, attractive. Where you start to paint a picture of the infinite worth of human beings, that God would love them so much that he would come for them and die for them. And you hold life in value. And then we don't just use our bodies to do whatever we want with, but we honor and glorify God with our bodies in incredible ways. And you need to know those things have a way of being both offensive and attractive in that space where you refuse to bend the knee to the idols of our day. And it's easy to think at that point, like, what? Like, we don't have idols. Like, no one's erecting a big giant statue in the middle of the city and going, come bow down to this and worship it. Oh, but we do. We do. John Calvin once wrote this really cool, insightful line. He said, the human heart, well, it's a factory of idols. And every one of us, from his mother's womb on, are expert in inventing them. We make them so easily. Idols are, well, what did Nebuchadnezzar call the idol? An image. An image. Idols are these images of the things that we want more than God. The image of the good life. When you're scrolling through Instagram, you're like, oh, that's it. Or you're flipping through Facebook, or you're driving down the road and you see the things, and you're like, that is the image of the life I want. All of a sudden, you realize you, my friend, have an idol. A thing that you want more than him. A place that exists in this world rather than longing for the one that's to come, called home. And we erect idols all the time. And we bend a knee to those. And we find ourselves reshaped into their image. Where instead of looking like the image of God, we look like the image of the American life, the good life. Our slice of the American pie, or whatever it is we want. We find that we too often bend a knee. Not taking the way of subversive loyalty, but just assimilating into Babylon. Now, as the band comes up, I want to ask you a question that in some ways should seem so obvious, but it's not. And here it is. Where was Daniel in all of this? This book is called the book of, where's he at? Why doesn't he show up? Why isn't he with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Some commentators say, well, he was on vacation. I don't know about that. Others say, well, he had a lot of royal duties, so he was probably away that day. Could be a possibility. There's another one. He bent the knee and he bowed down. The text goes through great lengths to point out that Nebuchadnezzar called all of his prefects, all of his satraps, all of his governors, all of his officials, everybody, says it over and over again. He called them all to that place for the dedication. And yet only 3 did not bend a knee that day. Now look, I'm not saying, the text doesn't say that Daniel bent a knee, but it doesn't say he didn't. And strangely, for a book that bears his name, he's missing from being there with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The one that had brought them into their positions is strangely absent from being positioned alongside them in the furnace. What if he bent the knee? What if Daniel is actually a lot like you and a lot like me, and found himself caught up in the world around him, and found himself just swallowed up into that giant called Babylon, and just thought, this won't hurt. I'll just compromise this. I'll just do this thing. Let's just get along. Let's just move forward. And he bent the knee. And that's why he's missing. Think about that moment now. When Nebuchadnezzar stands up, he goes, look, hold on, guys. Did we not put 3 bound men into that furnace? I see a 4th man. Could you imagine the moment Daniel heard those words? He goes, I should have been that man. I should have been in that flame with them. I should have been in that fire with them. That was my place. And what we find is there is one like a son of God taking his place in that fire, standing there in the midst of that place with them. You, my friend, listen, no matter how you bent your knee, no matter how you've been reshaped and formed in the image of this world, he is going into the flames on your behalf because he has come for you. And he chooses you to fight for you, not to keep you from going into exile, but to be with you in it and to bring you through it. So for every one of us who's bent the knee, whether it was Daniel or you or me, He said, I'm going into the fire, and I'm going to be there with you in that space. Could you just imagine Daniel going, that was my place. He took my place. Is that not what Jesus Christ has done for every single one of you? He never bent a knee. And yet he chose to go into that place of suffering and death. There in the Garden of Gethsemane, staring straight into the fire, staring straight into that space, he went in knowing that every flame, everything was worth it to bring you back out. Because those 3 men walked out unchained and unbound, not even smelling like the smoke of the fire. And he is doing that for you and for me. And then what's beautiful is that there's this parallel in this story that just a few chapters later literally lined up in the same way. Daniel's now serving for another king. And he's presented with another chance now to bend a knee and to refuse to pray to God. And he goes, no, I know how this story goes. I'm not going to do the same thing again. And so he flings his doors wide open and he prays to God in front of everybody. And they throw him in a lion's den. And the king rushes to the lion's den the next morning. He says, Daniel, are you in there? And Daniel goes, I'm still here. For God has sent his angel, his Malach, the same word of the one in the fire. He sent his Malach and he has saved me from the mouth of the lion. I'm here. May that be true of you. May you so trust and have faith that you see what God is doing and you're longing for that world to come. That you know that God is your defender, that he's your rescuer, your provider, that he is there with you in it, and he can save you from the mouth of the lion, the mouth of death, the mouth of the furnace of it all, because he's chosen to come for you. For every one of us who's bent the knee to Babylon, there is hope for you, and his name is Jesus. Please stand. Come to communion, where you can receive the very body and blood of Christ offered for you. If this has ever made more sense, I don't know if it has. Like, here it is, the exchange where he goes, my life for yours. You come and take up my life because I've gone in for you so that you may have life. So come and receive the body, the blood of Christ. Tear off a piece of bread, dip it in the cup that is representative of his blood, and take that life into you that he is offering for you as you find yourself in the midst of this exile. Please come.
Were creation suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one cry, then from north to south and east to west, we'd hear Christ be magnified. Were the whole earth echoing his eminence, his name would burst from sea and sky, from rivers to the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just the doorway into resurrection life. If I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, and my song will be the same. Christ, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. I won't bow down to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just the doorway into resurrection life. If I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, and my song will be the same. Oh Christ, Christ be magnified. Let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified from the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me.
So good. So good this morning. What an encouragement that there is a third way. When those three men walked into that fire, I don't know if you caught this part or not, but they were bound. Their hands were tied. There were shackles on their feet, and they walked into that fire literally in bondage and bound together. And I don't know if you asked yourself this question or not, but when they walked out of that fire, they didn't smell like smoke, right? Their clothes weren't singed, but what they did not have any longer was they did not have the chains that bound them. They were walking in bondage, and when they walked out of that fire, they were walking in freedom. And so I just want to give you guys a blessing. If you'll extend a hand this week, I don't know what chains you walked in with. I don't know what binds you. I don't know what shackles you have. But may you know that there is a third way. There is a better way than the way that you're living now. There's a way of Jesus, and may you walk in freedom this week. Have a great week. Go in peace.